Rain crashed against the carriage roof as Lady Iselle Ardennes stumbled barefoot across the muddy courtyard, clutching a torn letter against her chest, while the grand doors of Graythorne Manor slammed shut behind her. "Do not return to this house again," the Dowager Duchess declared from the stone steps. "You have brought shame enough." Servants lowered their eyes. No one moved to help her. Then her husband turned away too. Duke Roderick Valimira did not even look back as his mother ordered Giselle's trunks thrown into the rain beside the broken fountain, where she had once welcomed guests as his duchess. And that was the moment everything changed. Because hidden inside the soaked letter, trembling in Iselle's hand, was news neither of them knew. An old marquess from the northern provinces had died 3 nights earlier, and every estate, every fortune, every vineyard, every silver mine, every carriage, and every acre bearing his ancient seal had been left to one woman alone, the same woman they had just cast out into the storm. But before Iselle could even open the letter fully, another carriage rolled through the gates at dangerous speed. Armed riders stepped into the rain, carrying black banners marked with the crest of House Meyerfeld. Then one of them bowed before her. Not before the Duke, not before the Duchess Mother, before the abandoned woman standing in the mud. If you had discovered your entire life was built on lies in a single night, would you return for revenge or disappear forever? And tell me, which beautiful part of the world are you watching from today? If this story already has your heart racing, subscribe and stay with us because Iselle's story is only beginning. Rainwater rushed down the stone lions guarding Graythorne Manor, while Lady Iselle Ardennes stood in the courtyard with trembling hands and mud clinging to the hem of her dress. A cold wind swept across the estate as servants dragged her trunks through the rain and dropped them beside the fountain without care. The Dowager Duchess, Lady Maevra Valimir, watched from the steps with hard eyes. Jewels gleamed at her throat while thunder rolled above the manor roofs. "You will leave before sunrise," she said. "You have humiliated this family long enough." Iselle stared at her husband. Duke Roderick Valimir remained silent beside his mother, his face unreadable beneath the lantern light. That silence wounded her more deeply than the storm itself. 3 years earlier, he had placed a ring upon her hand before half the kingdom. 3 years earlier, he had sworn no force on earth would ever make him abandon her. Now he would not even defend her. A stable boy hurried through the gates, carrying a dripping cloak. "Your Grace," he called breathlessly. "Riders are approaching from the northern road." Maevra frowned. At this hour, before anyone answered, another carriage thundered through the gates. Black horses reared against the rain, while armed riders surrounded the courtyard. Their dark banners snapped violently in the wind. Every servant stepped back in alarm. A tall, older man descended first from the carriage. Silver streaked his hair, and his cane struck sharply against the stones as he approached. Iselle recognized him after a stunned moment. Lord Sorrel Meyerfeld, the steward of the late Marquess of Norbridge. Roderick straightened immediately. "Lord Sorrel, this is unexpected." The older man ignored him completely. Instead, he stopped before Iselle and bowed deeply. "Lady Iselle Ardennes," he announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "I have travelled through the storm to deliver urgent news regarding the estate of the late Marquess Leontius Meyerfeld." Silence fell. Iselle blinked rain from her eyes. "The Marquess is dead?" "He passed peacefully 4 nights ago." She lowered her gaze. Though distant, the Marquess had once shown her kindness when few nobles bothered to remember her name. Maevra folded her hands tightly. This matter can wait until morning. I fear it cannot, Lord Sorrel replied. He withdrew a sealed parchment from inside his coat. Several wax seals marked the edges. The Marquess left behind a final testament. It was witnessed by magistrates, clergy, and royal representatives. His eyes settled on Iselle again. By his lawful decree, every title, estate, business holding, and fortune belonging to House Myrefeld now passes to Lady Iselle Arden. The courtyard erupted with gasps. One servant dropped a lantern onto the wet stones. Roderick finally moved. What nonsense is this? No nonsense, Your Grace, Lord Sorrel answered calmly. The inheritance has already been recognized in court. Maevra descended the steps at once. Impossible. The Marquess had distant cousins. He disowned them years ago. Iselle stared at the parchment in disbelief. Why would he leave everything to me? Lord Sorrel's expression softened. Because your mother once saved his life. The words struck like lightning. My mother died when I was 12. Yes, he said quietly. But before her death, Lady Evelys Arden protected the Marquess during a carriage attack near the Western Cliffs. He never forgot her loyalty. Roderick's jaw tightened. For months his mother had accused Iselle of bringing nothing into the marriage except disgrace. The Dowager never missed an opportunity to remind the household that Iselle came from a nearly ruined family with little influence left. Now, the woman they had thrown into the rain possessed one of the largest fortunes in the kingdom. Maevra recovered first. Surely this can be discussed inside. Iselle slowly lifted her eyes toward her. Just moments earlier, the Dowager had ordered servants to cast her out like a criminal. Now her voice carried warmth. The sudden change made Iselle's stomach twist. Roderick stepped closer, sir. Iselle, you are soaked. Come inside before you fall ill. She looked at him carefully. Not once during the humiliation had he defended her. Not once had he questioned his mother when false accusations spread through the manor like poison. Earlier that evening, Maevra had claimed Iselle secretly sold family heirlooms to pay gambling debts belonging to her younger brother. The accusation was untrue, yet Roderick allowed the servants and guests to believe it. Even now he had not apologized. Lord Sorrel noticed her silence. My lady, the northern residence has already been prepared for your arrival. Maevra's eyes flashed. Arrival? She is the Duchess of Greythorn. Perhaps, Lord Sorrel replied, but she is also now the sole heir of House Myrefeld. Several legal matters require her immediate attention. A sharp gust swept through the courtyard. Iselle clutched the wet parchment while confusion churned inside her chest. Only hours ago, she had believed herself abandoned completely. Now everything around her had shifted. Yet, beneath the shock, rested another feeling. Fear. Because fortunes never arrived without enemies. One of the riders suddenly approached Lord Sorrel and whispered urgently into his ear. The steward's expression darkened instantly. "What is it?" Iselle asked. "A carriage has been following us since midnight," he answered carefully. "We believed we lost them near the lower bridge." Roderick frowned. "Who?" Lord Sorrel glanced toward the gates. Men carrying the crest of House Verlick. Maevra inhaled sharply. Even Iselle recognized the danger in that name. House Verlick had spent years battling the Myrefeld family over trade routes and mining rights. Rumors claimed the Verlick sons would do anything for power. Thunder cracked overhead. Then another sound echoed from beyond the gates. Horses, fast approaching. The guards barely reacted before 6 riders stormed into the courtyard. Mud splashed across the stones as the lead rider dismounted in one swift movement. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried a scar cutting across one brow. His gaze landed directly on Iselle. There she is. Roderick stepped forward immediately. State your business. The stranger removed his gloves slowly. Cassian Verlick. Several servants paled. Iselle felt the tension sharpen instantly. She had heard stories about the eldest Verlick son for years. Ruthless in business, dangerous in temper, impossible to outmaneuver. Cassian's eyes never left her face. "So the rumors are true," he said softly. "The forgotten Duchess inherited everything." Maevra lifted her chin. "This estate is under ducal protection." Cassian smiled faintly. "I did not come for the estate." Every instinct inside Iselle warned her something was wrong. Lord Sorel moved closer to her side. "You are not welcome here tonight." Cassian ignored him. Instead, he reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "My family possesses evidence regarding the late Marquess's inheritance," he said. "Evidence Lady Iselle deserves to hear before she signs anything." Roderick's face hardened. "If you intend to manipulate my wife during a family matter, you should leave." "Your wife?" Cassian finally looked toward the Duke. Interesting title for a man who just threw her into the rain. The courtyard fell deadly quiet. Roderick took a threatening step forward, but Iselle spoke first. "What evidence?" Cassian unfolded the paper carefully. "The late Marquess did not choose you merely because of gratitude toward your mother." Lord Sorrel's grip tightened around his cane. Cassian continued calmly, "He believed you were his blood granddaughter." The world seemed to stop. Rain hammered the stones while every face froze in shock. Iselle stared at him. "That cannot be true." Maevra whispered something under her breath. Roderick looked toward Lord Sorel sharply. "Answer him." The steward remained silent for several painful seconds. That silence was answer enough. Iselle's pulse thundered in her ears. "Lord Sorel?" The older man lowered his gaze. "The Marquess requested secrecy until after his death." "You knew, yes." Her chest tightened painfully. All her life, she had believed her father abandoned the family before her birth. Her mother never spoke of him beyond a few broken memories. Now strangers stood in the rain, telling her an entirely different history. Cassian folded the document again. House Verlick learned fragments of the truth years ago. "We suspected the Marquess had an illegitimate descendant hidden away from court." Roderick looked furious. "Why reveal this now?" "Because powerful men will come after her inheritance by sunrise," Cassian answered. "And because the court will question whether a hidden granddaughter can legally control the Myrafeld holdings alone." Maevra recovered quickly. "Then she will remain here under Greythorn protection." Cassian laughed once. "Protection? This house publicly disgraced her before half the county." Iselle looked toward the manor windows. Curtains shifted everywhere. Servants and guests were already whispering. Humiliation burned through her again. Not long ago, those same people watched as silently while her belongings were thrown outside like rubbish. Now they would suddenly bow before her, because wealth changed everything. The realization exhausted her. Lord Sorel turned gently toward her. "My lady, we should depart before dawn." Roderick faced her at once. "Iselle, do not make decisions in anger." For the first time that night, she answered him without hesitation. "I am not angry anymore." The rain softened around them. She slowly removed the ducal ring from her finger and placed it into Roderick's hand. "I am simply finished being unwanted where I stand." No one spoke. Even Maevra looked startled. Roderick stared at the ring in silence while water dripped from his gloves. Iselle stepped toward the waiting carriage beside Lord Sorel. Then Cassian spoke again. "One warning before you leave, Lady Yselle." She paused. The Marquis's death was not natural. A chill travelled down her spine. Lord Sorel looked alarmed. "You cannot prove that." "Not yet," Cassian replied. "But before he died, the Marquess sent letters claiming someone inside the royal court intended to seize the Myrefeld fortune." Yselle's breath caught. Cassian's expression hardened as another flash of lightning illuminated the courtyard. "And whoever killed him will soon realize the inheritance now belongs to you." A distant bell rang from the chapel tower as the manor guards closed the gates against the storm. Isisils climbed into the carriage beside Lord Sorel, but before the door shut completely, Roderick caught the frame with one hand. Rain slid down his dark hair, while anger and regret battled openly across his face. "You cannot trust Verlick," he warned. Cassian rested one arm against his saddle. Strange advice from a husband who failed to protect his own wife. Roderick ignored him and looked only at Yselle. "Whatever my mother has done tonight, I will settle it by morning." Yselle held his gaze quietly. "Morning arrived too late for us." The words struck harder than shouting. Roderick stepped back slowly. Lord Sorel ordered the driver forward, and the carriage rolled away from Greythorn Manor through sheets of rain. Yselle watched the estate disappear behind the trees while thunder echoed across the hills. For several silent minutes, nobody spoke. Then Lord Sorel removed another sealed letter from his coat. "The Marquess instructed me to deliver this only after you left Greythorn." Yselle accepted it carefully. The handwriting across the seal looked shaky with age. "My dearest granddaughter," she read softly. "If this letter reaches your hands, then I have already failed to protect you from the wolves surrounding my house." Her throat tightened. Lord Sorel stared through the rain-covered window. "There is more." Yselle unfolded the final page. "The greatest danger is not the court," she continued. "It is the man wearing the silver hawk ring. Trust nobody carrying that crest." A violent crack sounded outside. The carriage lurched suddenly. One horse screamed. Then the driver shouted in terror. Lord Sorel reached for the carriage pistol, hidden beneath the seat, while the wheels dragged sharply through the mud. Outside, riders burst from the forest, on both sides of the road, carrying hooded lanterns that swung wildly in the storm. Yselle caught a glimpse of steel. Then she saw it, a silver hawk, engraved upon a gloved hand, before the first carriage window shattered beside her face. Lord Sorel fired the pistol through the shattered carriage window, just as another rider lunged from the darkness. The blast echoed across the forest road, while frightened horses reared violently against their harnesses. Yselle grabbed the seat to steady herself as broken glass scattered across her lap. "Stay down!" Lord Sorel shouted. A second impact struck the carriage door. Wood splintered inward. One of the guards outside cried out before collapsing beneath pounding hooves. Rain blurred everything beyond the lantern light. Riders circled the carriage like wolves hunting wounded prey. Then a sharp whistle cut through the storm. 3 arrows flew from the trees. One attacker toppled from his horse instantly. Another screamed and vanished into the mud. Yselle looked toward the forest edge, just as more mounted men burst through the rain carrying the crest of House Verlick. Cassian Verlick rode at the front with a drawn sword gleaming beneath flashes of lightning. "Drive forward!" he roared. The coachman snapped the reins desperately, while Verlick riders crashed into the attackers. Steel rang through the night. Horses collided. Mud sprayed beneath pounding boots. Yselle caught sight of a man, wearing the silver hawk ring, climbing onto the back of the carriage. Before he could force the door open, Cassian rode beside the moving wheels and struck him down with one brutal swing. The attacker disappeared beneath the horses. Lord Sorel exhaled heavily. We would already be dead without him. The carriage raced deeper into the forest, while battle sounds faded behind them. Cassian and several riders followed close beside the road, until they finally reached an abandoned chapel hidden among towering trees. Torches flickered beneath the ruined archway. Cassian dismounted first. Everyone inside. Yselle stepped carefully from the carriage, her pulse still racing. Rainwater soaked her sleeves while thunder rolled farther away across the hills. The old chapel stood broken with age. Cracked statues lined the entrance, and vines crawled over the stone walls. Yet armed guards already secured every corner of the grounds as though the place had been prepared long before tonight. Lord Sorel noticed it too. "You expected an attack," he said quietly. Cassian handed his sword to a guard. "I expected desperation." Inside the chapel, servants hurried to light more candles. A physician approached immediately to inspect the cut along Yselle's cheek where shattered glass had struck her skin. "It is shallow, my lady," the physician assured her. Yselle barely heard him. Her thoughts remained trapped on the silver hawk ring mentioned in the Marquis's letter. Cassian removed his gloves, slowly. "Tell her the truth now." Lord Sorel looked exhausted. "Not here. She nearly died because of secrets." Yselle stepped forward. "I want answers." The oldest steward finally nodded. "The Silver Hawk belongs to a private royal faction called the Sovereign Circle," he explained. "For years they have manipulated inheritances, marriages, and trade agreements across the kingdom." Yselle frowned. "Why would they care about me?" "Because House Meyerfeld controls northern silver routes and half the western ports. Whoever controls that fortune gains influence over Parliament itself." A cold silence followed. Cassian leaned against the chapel table. The circle believed the Marquess would die without a lawful heir. "Your inheritance ruined their plans." Yselle looked down at the sealed letter, still trembling in her hands. "Then why hide my identity all these years?" Lord Sorel answered softly. "Your mother begged the Marquess to protect you from court politics." At the mention of her mother, Yselle's chest tightened painfully. She knew who my grandfather was, yes. "Then why tell me nothing?" Lord Sorel hesitated. "Because your father discovered the truth too." The room grew still again. Yselle slowly lifted her eyes. "You said, 'My father abandoned us.' That is what your mother wanted the world to believe." His voice lowered further. "Your father was murdered before your birth." Shock crashed through her. Cassian watched her carefully, but did not interrupt. Lord Sorel continued. "Your father, Rowan Arden, served as the Marquis's private advisor. He uncovered financial dealings connected to the Sovereign Circle shortly before his death." Yselle struggled to breathe evenly. Everything she believed about her family kept breaking apart piece by piece. "Who killed him?" she whispered. "We never discovered the name." A guard suddenly entered the chapel, carrying a drenched satchel. This was recovered from one of the dead attackers. Cassian opened the satchel immediately. Several documents spilled across the table, along with a silver ring engraved with the hawk crest. Yselle stepped closer, then she froze. One document carried the seal of Greythorn Manor. Lord Sorel noticed it at the same moment. Cassian unfolded the paper silently before looking toward Yselle. "It is a payment order," he said. "Issued yesterday." Her stomach twisted. "Signed by whom?" Cassian turned the document toward the candlelight. Duke Roderick Valemere. The chapel seemed to tilt around her. No, Iselle whispered instantly. Roderick would never arrange an attack. Cassian's expression remained unreadable. The document paid mercenaries connected to the Sovereign Circle. Lord Sorrel looked troubled rather than convinced. The Duke may not have known their true allegiance. Or perhaps he knew exactly. Iselle stepped back from the table. Earlier that night, Roderick had stood silently, while his mother destroyed her dignity before the entire household. Yet, even now, she struggled to imagine him arranging murder. A distant memory surfaced suddenly. 2 months earlier, she had entered Roderick's study unexpectedly, and found him arguing with a stranger, wearing gloves marked by silver stitching. The conversation stopped immediately when she appeared. At the time, she ignored it. Now dread spread slowly through her chest. Cassian studied her face. "You remembered something." Before she could answer, the chapel doors burst open again. One of Verlick's riders hurried inside, breathing hard. Greythorn soldiers are approaching the forest. Iselle's pulse jumped. "Roderick," the rider nodded. "The Duke leads them personally." Cassian's jaw tightened. "How many?" "At least 20. Lord Sorrel gripped his cane anxiously. "If the Sovereign Circle controls Greythorn, we cannot remain here." Iselle looked toward the storm outside. "What if he came to help?" Cassian answered immediately. "Then why bring armed men into hiding at midnight?" No one argued with that. Torches were extinguished quickly, while guards prepared horses near the rear entrance. The physician wrapped Iselle in a heavy cloak before guiding her outside through the rain. Cassian mounted his horse beside her carriage again. "We leave now." The group moved through narrow forest paths hidden beneath thick branches. Rain softened to a steady mist, while distant thunder faded behind them. Iselle sat silently during the journey, unable to stop thinking about Roderick. Had every moment of their marriage been false? She remembered the early months before Maevra poisoned the household against her. Roderick once read poetry beside the winter fire. He once rode 3 hours through snow simply because she mentioned missing the seaside cliffs near her childhood home. Those memories felt painfully real, yet tonight he had failed her completely. Near dawn, the convoy finally reached Blackmere Hall, an isolated estate hidden beside steep cliffs overlooking the northern sea. Servants hurried outside, carrying lanterns as the gates opened. An older woman descended the manor steps before the horses fully stopped. "Lord Sorrel," she called, relief flooding her voice. "Thank heaven!" The steward bowed slightly. "Lady Cerentha, we arrived safely." The woman's attention shifted to Iselle at once. Her eyes softened with emotion. "You look exactly like your mother." Iselle climbed slowly from the carriage. "You knew her?" Lady Cerentha took her hands gently. "Evelis was my dearest friend." Warmth touched Iselle's chest for the first time that terrible night. Inside Blackmere Hall, servants prepared hot tea and dry clothing, while guards secured every entrance. Unlike Greythorn Manor, the atmosphere carried no cold judgment or hidden whispers. Portraits lined the walls of the drawing room. Iselle stopped suddenly before one painting near the fireplace. The man in the portrait looked strikingly familiar. Same eyes, same expression, same dark hair. "The Marquess," Lady Cerentha said quietly from behind her. Iselle stared at the painting in silence. For the first time, she truly saw the resemblance between them. Lady Cerentha guided her toward the fire. "Your grandfather loved your mother deeply. When she married beneath her station, the court punished her mercilessly." Iselle frowned. "My father was not noble?" "He was honorable," Lady Cerentha replied carefully. But he came from an old family ruined by political war. The court considered him unworthy. Lord Sorrel entered carrying another bundle of letters. These belonged to your mother. Iselle accepted them with trembling hands. Every answer seemed buried inside forgotten papers and dead voices. Cassian remained near the window, watching the dark cliffs outside. The Duke's men may still track us here. Lady Cerentha looked displeased. Then we prepare defences. Iselle opened the first letter carefully. The handwriting belonged to her mother. If danger ever reaches you, trust nobody wearing noble smiles. The court destroys women quietly. They smile while stealing everything around you. A shiver passed through her. Another letter slipped from the bundle and fell onto the carpet. Cassian picked it up first. His expression changed immediately. "What is it?" Iselle asked. He handed her the page silently. At the bottom rested a familiar signature, Roderick Valimere. But the letter was years old. Iselle read the opening lines once, then again. "My dearest Evelys, I swear your daughter will always remain safe under Greythorn protection. My family owes you a debt that can never be repaid." Her breath caught sharply. Roderick had known her mother. No, worse. He had known the truth about her long before their marriage ever began. Iselle lowered the letter slowly while questions crashed through her mind. If Roderick knew her family history, then why had he allowed Maevra to insult her lineage? Why pretend ignorance while hiding promises made to her mother? Outside, waves battered the cliffs beneath Blackmere Hall as dawn finally broke across the sea. Cassian watched her from the window, and he seemed unsettled. Somewhere beyond the storm, the Duke was searching for her, with armed men, secrets, and motives she never fully understood. Iselle feared her husband more than the enemies hunting her. Iselle did not sleep. Wind battered the cliffs outside Blackmere Hall, while candlelight trembled across the drawing room. The old letter from Roderick remained spread open upon the table beside her untouched tea. Every sentence inside it deepened the ache growing in her chest. He had known her mother. He had promised to protect her. Yet he still stood silent while Maevra destroyed her before an entire household. Nothing about it made sense. Footsteps approached from the corridor. Cassian entered carrying a folded map beneath one arm and stopped when he noticed her awake beside the fire. "You should rest," he said. Iselle folded the letter carefully. "I tried." Cassian placed the map upon the table. Greythorn riders searched 2 nearby villages before dawn. Your husband is getting desperate. The word husband felt strange now. Iselle lifted her eyes toward him. "You speak as though Roderick is already my enemy." Cassian leaned against the table silently for a moment. "Do you truly believe he searched for you out of love?" The question cut deeply because she no longer knew the answer herself. Before she could reply, hurried voices echoed from the entrance hall. A guard burst into the room, breathing hard. Someone breached the western gate. Cassian reached for the pistol at his side immediately. How many? Only one. Another figure appeared moments later between the guards. Roderick Valimere. Rain soaked his coat while exhaustion shadowed his face. Mud stained his boots as though he had ridden without stopping through the night. Iselle rose so quickly, her chair struck the floor behind her. Cassian stepped between them instantly. "You should have remained outside the gates." Roderick ignored him completely. His eyes settled on Iselle with raw relief. "Thank God." She stared at him without moving. "Why are you here?" "To take you somewhere safe." Cassian laughed coldly. "That explanation arrives rather late." Roderick finally looked toward him. The Sovereign Circle infiltrated Greythorn months ago. My mother does not even realize how deeply. Isel's breath caught. Cassian crossed his arms. Convenient story. It is the truth. Roderick removed a folded document from inside his coat and handed it directly to Giselle. Read the signatures. She unfolded the paper carefully. Fear tightened her stomach instantly. Several noble names covered the page, including ministers close to the crown. Beside them appeared records of secret financial agreements tied to northern silver shipments. At the bottom rested the silver hawk crest. Roderick's voice lowered. Your grandfather discovered these dealings before his death. The Circle has been smuggling royal silver through private military routes for years. Giselle looked at him sharply. And you knew? I learned only recently. Cassian remained unconvinced. Then explain the payment order carrying your seal. Roderick's expression darkened. Forged. No. A new voice echoed from the doorway. Lady Maevra entered the room surrounded by armed guards. Giselle froze. The Dowager Duchess wore traveling clothes beneath the heavy cloak, but her cold posture remained unchanged. Behind her stood 3 men carrying silver hawk rings openly upon their gloved hands. Roderick turned in shock. Mother. Maevra's gaze moved calmly across the room before resting on Giselle. You should have accepted exile quietly. Cassian drew his pistol immediately while Blackmere guards rushed forward. The Dowager smiled faintly. If anyone fires, the cliffs below this estate will become your graves before sunrise. More armed men suddenly appeared across the balcony above them. Giselle realized the manor had already been surrounded. Roderick stared at his mother in disbelief. You are working with the Circle? For survival? Mayasa, Maevra answered sharply. Your father nearly ruined this family resisting them. Silence crashed through the room. Roderick looked shaken. Father died from illness. No, Maevra replied. He died after refusing to surrender Greythorn shipping routes. Giselle felt the entire room tightening with fear and betrayal. Cassian kept his pistol aimed steadily. You murdered the Marquess too? The Dowager's expression never changed. Leontis Myrefeld became troublesome. He intended to expose powerful men. Roderick stepped toward her slowly. You let me believe Giselle betrayed this family. I protected this family. You humiliated her. Maevra's eyes sharpened suddenly. Because the moment she inherited Myrefeld wealth, Greythorn became vulnerable. The Circle ordered her removal before the inheritance transferred fully. Giselle felt sick. Every insult, every accusation, every cruel whisper inside Greythorn Manor had been planned deliberately. Roderick's voice grew rough with anger. You used me. For your future. The Dowager raised one hand. Instantly, the armed men aimed their rifles. Cassian moved closer toward Giselle protectively. You will not leave this estate alive if you fire. Maevra smiled again. I did not come to kill Lady Giselle. Her gaze shifted toward Roderick. I came for you. Confusion crossed his face only briefly before one of the Silver Hawk men struck him hard from behind. Roderick collapsed against the table while guards seized his arms. Giselle gasped. Stop! Cassian fired first. The shot shattered a lantern overhead. Darkness exploded across the room as screaming erupted everywhere. Gunfire thundered through Blackmere Hall. Giselle dropped behind the overturned table while glass rained from the ceiling. Guards fought violently across the drawing room. Smoke filled the air. Someone crashed through the balcony rail above them. Cassian grabbed Giselle's wrist suddenly. Move. They ran through the rear corridor while bullets struck the walls behind them. Servants fled in terror. through smoke-filled hallways as flames began spreading from the shattered lantern oil. "Roderick!" Ysel cried. Cassian pulled her forward harder. "If we stop now, we die." Another explosion shook the manor. They reached the lower stables, where Verlic riders were already preparing horses. Lord Sorrel appeared beside the gates, bleeding from one shoulder. The Dowager took the Duke toward the cliffs, he warned breathlessly. Isel's heart pounded painfully. Despite everything, she could not abandon Roderick to his own mother. She seized a riding pistol from the stable wall. "Take me there." Cassian stared at her. "That is madness. Then ride with me." For one tense moment he said nothing. Then he climbed onto his horse and offered her his hand. The cliffs overlooking Blackmere crashed with violent waves beneath the storming sky. Torches flickered wildly near the edge, where Maevra's guards forced Roderick onto his knees. Blood ran from the Duke's temple, but fury burned fiercely in his eyes. "You destroyed this family," he said hoarsely. Maevra stood before him calmly. "No, I preserved it." "You murdered father." He chose pride over survival. Behind nearby rocks, Iselas and Cassian watched unseen, while Verlic riders spread quietly through the darkness. Roderick lifted his head slowly. "And now?" The Dowager's voice turned cold as winter stone. "Now Greythorn requires a more obedient Duke." One guard raised a pistol directly toward Roderick's head. Ysel fired first. The shot struck the guard's shoulder before chaos erupted across the cliffs. Verlic riders stormed from hiding, while waves crashed violently below. Cassian fought two men near the edge, as steel flashed beneath torchlight. Roderick broke free during the confusion and struck another attacker hard across the jaw. Maevra stepped backward toward the cliff path, stunned by Isel's arrival. "You!" she whispered. Ysel aimed the pistol steadily despite trembling hands. "You should never have touched my family." For the first time, fear entered the Dowager's eyes. Then another gunshot exploded from the darkness. Roderick staggered violently beside the cliffs. Blood spread across his chest. Ysel screamed his name as he collapsed near the crashing sea below. Maevra turned in horror while the hidden gunman disappeared into the storm behind the rocks. Cassian cursed and chased after the fleeing figure, with two riders close behind him. Ysel dropped beside Roderick on the rain-soaked ground, pressing trembling hands against the spreading blood, while the Duke struggled painfully for breath beneath the roaring black sea cliffs tonight. Roderick's fingers closed weakly around Isel's wrist as rain poured across the cliffs. Blood soaked through her hands no matter how hard she tried to stop it. "Stay awake," she pleaded. "Do not close your eyes." Behind them, steel clashed in the darkness in the Verlic while rider battled the remaining assassins near the cliff path. Torches rolled across the wet stones as men shouted through the storm. Roderick forced himself to speak. "The shooter was not one of my mother's guards." Ysel leaned closer. "Do not talk." But he shook his head painfully. "The circle answers to someone higher," he whispered. "Someone inside the royal court." A shadow moved suddenly near the rocks above them. Ysel lifted the pistol instantly. Lady Maevra stood there alone now, soaked by rain and trembling for the first time since Ysel had ever known her. The proud Dowager no longer looked untouchable. She looked frightened. "You were meant to leave quietly," Maevra said weakly. "None of this was supposed to happen." Ysel rose slowly to her feet, fury burning through her chest. "You destroyed innocent lives. I saved Greythorn from ruin. You murdered your husband." The accusation struck harder than the storm itself. Maevra's composure finally cracked. "Your grandfather forced this war when he refused the Circle's demands. Every noble family became trapped after that. There was no escape anymore. Roderick struggled upright, despite the blood staining his coat. "So you sacrificed everyone around you?" His mother looked at him with something close to desperation. "I did it for you." "No," he answered bitterly. "You did it for power," hooves thundered nearby. Cassian returned through the storm with several riders behind him, his expression grim. "The gunman escaped," he announced, but one dying attacker revealed a name before he collapsed. Isel turned sharply toward him. Cassian's eyes darkened. Lord Minister Halbrecht. Even Maevra looked stunned, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, a royal advisor trusted by the crown itself. Roderick exhaled painfully. Then the circle reaches deeper than we feared. Lightning split the sky above the sea cliffs. Far below, waves crashed against jagged rocks, while Blackmere Hall burned in the distance behind them. Isel suddenly understood something terrifying. This was no longer a fight over inheritance alone. It was a war buried inside the kingdom itself. Cassian stepped closer, rain running down his face. Halbrecht will move quickly once he learns the Duke survived. Roderick looked toward Isel, despite the pain twisting across his features. "You must leave the north tonight." "No," she answered immediately. "Ysel, you spent months hiding truths from me," she said, voice shaking. "But I will not run again while people hunt my family like animals." For the first time since the nightmare began, something changed in Roderick's expression. Not pride, not authority. Respect. A distant horn echoed through the storm. Cassian turned sharply toward the forest road. "More riders are coming." Lord Sorel approached breathlessly from the lower path. "Not enemies. They carry the royal crest." Everyone fell silent, because if royal soldiers had arrived before dawn, then someone inside the palace already knew everything. Royal soldiers emerged from the forest road carrying lanterns that glowed through the rain. Their armored horses slowed near the burning remains of Blackmere Hall, while waves crashed violently below the cliffs. At their front rode a stern older commander, bearing the royal crest upon his chest. "Lower your weapons," he ordered. Nobody moved. Cassian kept one hand near his sword, while Verlic riders surrounded Isel protectively. Roderick remained weak from blood loss beside the rocks, though he forced himself upright the moment the commander approached. The older soldier removed his gloves slowly. "Duke Valomer." "Lady Isel, by direct order of the crown, you are both summoned to the capital immediately." Isel's heart tightened. Cassian stepped forward. Under whose authority? Lord Regent Valemont. That name darkened every face around them. The Lord Regent governed royal affairs whenever the king's health failed, and rumors of the king's worsening illness had spread quietly for months across noble society. Roderick's expression hardened. Valemont serves beside Minister Halbrecht. The commander hesitated. That hesitation answered enough. Cassian moved closer toward Isel and lowered his voice. "This is a trap." Before anyone could react further, Maevra suddenly laughed behind them. Everyone turned sharply. The Dowager Duchess stood near the cliff path, with rain pouring down her face, but something inside her seemed broken now. Her eyes no longer carried calm control. "You still do not understand," she whispered. Roderick stared at her coldly. "What now?" Maevra looked directly at Isel. The Sovereign Circle was never created to steal fortunes. Lightning flashed across the sea. It was created to choose the next ruler of this kingdom. Silence swallowed the cliffs. Even the royal commander looked alarmed. Cassian frowned deeply. "What are you saying?" Maevra smiled bitterly. "The king is dying. Half the court already knows it. The Circle intends to place its own blood upon the throne before winter arrives. Yselle struggled to understand. What does that have to do with my inheritance? Everything! The Dowager pointed toward her. Your grandfather possessed documents proving the royal bloodline was altered 26 years ago. The storm seemed to freeze around them. Roderick looked stunned. Impossible. The late queen gave birth to twin sons, Maevra continued shakily, but only one child was presented to the kingdom. The other vanished before dawn. Cassian's face darkened instantly. You are lying. I wish I were. Yselle felt cold dread spreading through her chest. Maevra's eyes filled with strange sorrow. Your mother learned the truth years later. That is why she was hunted. That is why your father died. Roderick suddenly understood first. He looked toward Yselle slowly. No. Maevra nodded once. The missing royal bloodline passed through House Meyerfeld. Yselle stepped backward in shock. No, she whispered. The Dowager's voice trembled now. You were never merely an heiress. You were born carrying a claim powerful enough to destroy kingdoms. The royal commander immediately reached for his sword. Cassian reacted faster. Steel flashed through the rain as Verlic riders surrounded Yselle completely. No one touches her, he warned. The commander's soldiers raised rifles instantly. Roderick forced himself between both sides despite the blood soaking his coat. Enough! Tension exploded across the cliffs. One wrong movement would begin a massacre. Then hoofbeats thundered again from the eastern road. Another rider approached alone beneath the storm, carrying no banner at all. The horse stopped sharply near the burning manor ruins. The rider removed his hood. Lord Minister Halbrecht himself. Older than Yselle expected. Calm, elegant, terrifyingly composed. The royal soldiers lowered their weapons immediately. Halbrecht surveyed the scene with quiet disappointment. What a tragic amount of disorder! Cassian's jaw tightened. You murdered the Marquess. The minister ignored him and looked only at Yselle. You resemble your grandmother greatly. Fear crawled through her chest. Roderick stepped protectively closer despite his injuries. You will not take her. Halbrecht finally smiled faintly. My dear Duke, this stopped being your decision long ago. The minister dismounted slowly while rainwater rolled from his dark coat. For years, he continued calmly, the kingdom has balanced upon weak leadership, dying bloodlines, and frightened nobles. The Circle merely prepared for the inevitable. Yselle gathered her courage. By murdering innocent people. Innocence rarely survives near crowns. His answer chilled her more than the storm itself. Cassian moved slightly closer toward his riders. Say what you came to say. Halbrecht's eyes remained fixed on Yselle. The court will soon announce the king's passing. When that happens, civil war follows, unless a rightful heir appears quickly. His expression sharpened. You can prevent that. Yselle stared at him in disbelief. You expect me to help you? I expect you to survive. The minister reached into his coat and withdrew an aged document sealed with royal wax. The proof of your bloodline. Roderick looked furious. You killed people to obtain it. Yes, Halbrecht answered without shame, because desperate kingdoms are not ruled by kindness. The wind howled across the cliffs, while Blackmere Hall continued burning behind them. Yselle realized something terrible. Every noble family, every betrayal, every death surrounding her inheritance had only been the beginning. She was standing inside a battle for the throne itself. Halbrecht extended the document toward her. Come willingly, and I will spare those beside you. Cassian laughed harshly. You expect surrender after all this? The minister's calm expression finally hardened. "No, I expect necessity." He lifted one hand. More riders emerged from the forest instantly, dozens. Armed, surrounding every escape route. Even Cassian's men looked shaken now. Roderick quietly pulled Isel behind him despite struggling to remain standing. "Listen carefully," he murmured without turning. "If fighting begins, follow Cassian north through the lower cliffs." "What about you? I will hold them." Pain struck her chest unexpectedly, not because of titles or duty, because, despite everything, she suddenly believed him. Halbrecht noticed the movement and sighed softly. "Still trying to protect her after your mother betrayed you. Admirable." Maevra lowered her eyes silently. The minister turned toward the dowager. "You failed your final task." Fear flashed across Maevra's face. For the first time, the proud woman looked small. "You promised my family safety," she whispered. Halbrecht's expression turned, cold as stone. "And you believed powerful men keep such promises." He drew a pistol calmly and fired. The shot echoed across the cliffs. Maevra collapsed instantly onto the rain-soaked ground. Isel gasped. Roderick froze completely. His mother's body lay motionless near the cliff edge while storm winds tore through the silence around them. Halbrecht lowered the smoking pistol without emotion. "A loose end," he said simply. Something changed inside Roderick then. Years of obedience, grief, and buried rage shattered all at once. He seized a fallen rifle from the ground and fired directly toward the minister. Chaos exploded across the cliffs again. Gunfire thundered through the storm as soldiers collided violently near the burning manor. Cassian dragged Isel toward the lower rocks, while Verlic riders fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Roderick battled like a man with nothing left to lose. Halbrecht's men closed around him from every direction, while waves crashed below the cliffs, hard enough to shake the ground beneath them. Then a second explosion erupted from Blackmere Hall. The burning manor finally collapsed inward, sending sparks roaring into the black sky. For one terrible moment, everyone stopped moving. And in that moment, Halbrecht vanished. Smoke drifted across the shattered cliffs, while soldiers searched the darkness for Lord Halbrecht. The minister had vanished between one breath and the next, leaving only chaos behind him. Flames from Blackmere Hall still glowed against the storm clouds as wounded men groaned across the wet ground. Cassian wiped blood from his jaw and looked toward the forest road. He planned this escape before arriving. Roderick stood near the cliff edge, breathing heavily. His wound had reopened during the fighting, staining his coat again, but he ignored the pain completely. His eyes remained fixed on the place where his mother's body rested, beneath a torn cloak. Isel approached him slowly. For several moments neither of them spoke. Rain softened into cold mist around them, while distant thunder rolled farther out to sea. "She chose them over her own family," Roderick said quietly. Isel lowered her gaze. She was afraid. That does not excuse murder. No bitterness remained in his voice now, only grief. Before Isel could answer, Lord Sorrel hurried toward them, carrying a leather case protected beneath his arm. "We found this hidden inside the Dowager's carriage," he announced. Cassian opened the case immediately. Inside rested sealed court records, coded letters, and a small iron key wrapped in cloth. Roderick frowned. "What is the key for?" Lord Sorrel looked troubled. "The royal archives beneath Valemont Palace." Cassian's expression darkened. Then Halbrecht already reached the capital before us. Isel stared at the coded letters spread across the rocks. "What happens if he proves my bloodline before the court?" "He controls the succession," Cassian answered. Nobles terrified of civil war will support whichever heir he presents. Roderick suddenly stiffened while examining one document more closely. "This is not a succession plan," he said. Ysel moved beside him. A detailed map filled the parchment. Several noble estates were marked with red ink, including Greythorn, Meyerfeld lands, and royal military routes surrounding the capital itself. Cassian swore under his breath. "He plans to seize the city." Lord Sorel nodded grimly. "If Parliament resists his chosen ruler, the Circle will use force." The realization settled heavily upon them all. This was no longer hidden corruption inside noble houses. It was open treason against the crown. A surviving royal soldier approached carefully through the mist. "Your Grace, more troops are arriving from the southern pass. We cannot remain here." Roderick folded the map sharply. "Then we ride for the capital, before Hulbrecht reaches the palace archives." Cassian looked unconvinced. "The roads will already be watched." "Not the river route," Ysel said suddenly. 3 men turned toward her. She pointed toward the northern valley beyond the cliffs. "My mother once traveled through the old trading canals beneath Norhollow Bridge. Most nobles avoid them because of the marshlands." Lord Sorel's eyes widened slightly. "The hidden ferry passages." Cassian allowed himself a faint smile. Finally, a useful advantage. Within the hour, the surviving riders departed the ruined coast beneath heavy fog. They traveled through narrow woodland trails where twisted branches hid the road from distant patrols. By dawn, they reached the marsh canals near Norhollow Bridge, where old ferries waited beside dark water covered with drifting mist. An elderly ferryman stepped from a wooden shack carrying a lantern. The moment he saw Ysel, he froze. "Lady Evelis," he whispered. Ysel shook her head gently. "I am her daughter." Emotion filled the old man's face instantly. "Then heaven truly protects this family after all." He hurried them aboard without another question. The ferry moved silently through narrow waterways, hidden between tall reeds and hanging trees. No one spoke much during the journey. Exhaustion and fear weighed heavily over everyone aboard. Ysel stood near the railing, watching pale morning light spread across the water. Roderick approached carefully beside her. "You should rest," he said quietly. She kept her eyes ahead. "You said that before." Pain crossed his expression. "I deserve that." For a moment, only the sound of water touching wood filled the silence between them. Then Roderick removed something from inside his coat. Her ring, the same ducal ring she returned the night Greythorn cast her into the rain. "I should have stopped my mother long ago," he admitted. "I kept believing I could control the damage quietly without exposing the Circle too early." Ysel finally looked at him. "And while you waited, they destroyed lives. I know." His voice carried no defense now, only regret. Cassian watched them silently from the opposite side of the ferry before turning toward Lord Sorel. "How loyal is Parliament to Hulbrecht?" "Too loyal," the steward answered. "Half the ministers owe their fortunes to Circle investments." Roderick overheard the warning. "Then we expose the archives publicly before the court can bury them." A sudden scream interrupted the conversation. One of the ferrymen pointed toward the riverbank ahead. Riders. Dozens of them. Silver hawk banners emerged through the morning fog, while rifles glinted beneath the trees. Cassian cursed instantly. "They tracked us." Gunfire exploded across the marsh. Wood splintered beside Ysel as bullets tore through the ferry rails. Horses charged along both riverbanks, while Circle soldiers fired relentlessly into the narrow canal. "Get down!" Roderick shouted. Cassian returned fire beside the ferryman, while Lord Sorel desperately steered the vessel toward thicker reeds ahead. Panic spread across the passengers as another bullet struck the lantern mast overhead. Flames burst across the upper sail. The ferry lurched violently. Iselle grabbed the railing to avoid falling into the dark water below. Then she saw him. Lord Halbrecht rode calmly along the eastern bank beneath the fog, watching the attack unfold with terrifying patience. Their eyes met across the marsh. The minister smiled faintly. Then he raised one hand. A cannon, hidden among the trees, fired directly toward the ferry. Roderick reacted instantly. He threw Iselle backward, just as the explosion shattered the front half of the vessel. Water surged upward. Men screamed. Burning wood crashed into the canal while horses panicked along the shore. Iselle struck the flooded deck hard, struggling to breathe. The ferry was sinking. Cassian dragged 2 wounded guards from the flames, while Lord Sorel disappeared beneath collapsing timber near the stern. "Lord Sorel!" Iselle cried. Roderick seized her arm tightly. "We have to jump now." "But he is still inside." Another cannon blast thundered across the marsh. The ferry split apart beneath them. Roderick pulled Iselle into the freezing water seconds before the vessel disappeared, completely beneath smoke, fire, and screaming chaos around them forever. Iselle surfaced choking as icy water closed over her shoulders. Reeds bent violently around them, while burning wreckage drifted across the canal. Gunshots echoed through the fog, but the marsh currents carried survivors away from the shattered ferry before the riders could reload their cannon. Cassian emerged nearby, dragging Lord Sorel toward shallow ground. The older steward coughed weakly, yet remained alive. Roderick guided Iselle behind thick reeds, while Circle soldiers searched the banks above them. "They will hunt every survivor," Castellan warned quietly. Lord Sorel pulled a soaked bundle from beneath his coat. Not every loss tonight was meaningless. Inside the ruined cloth rested the archive key and several surviving letters from the Dowager's case. "Enough to expose Halbrecht?" Iselle asked. "Enough to destroy him," Roderick answered. "Halbrecht stole families, murdered innocents, and turned noble houses into weapons for his ambition. If he reached the throne first, the kingdom itself would drown in blood." Cassian looked toward the distant capital, visible beyond the marsh horizon. "Then we stop running." Roderick faced Iselle, despite exhaustion pulling heavily. "This began with your inheritance," he said quietly. "Now the kingdom rests in your hands too." The marsh wind swept around them, while armed riders searched somewhere beyond the fog. Iselle lifted her chin at last. "Then let them come." Fog covered the marshlands as Iselle, Roderick, Cassian, and the surviving guards reached the outer edges of the capital before dawn. Church bells echoed faintly across the distant city, while smoke rose from factory chimneys beneath the pale morning sky. The kingdom looked peaceful from afar, yet beneath that silence, betrayal waited inside the palace walls. They hid inside an abandoned glasshouse belonging to one of House Meyerfeld's forgotten trading estates. Cracked windows rattled softly in the wind, while servants loyal to Lord Sorel treated the wounded and prepared fresh horses. Roderick stood over a large table, studying the surviving documents rescued from the ferry attack. Cassian entered, carrying news from the city. "Halbrecht moved faster than we feared." Iselle looked up immediately. "What happened?" "The king died during the night." Silence filled the room. Even though they expected it, the reality still struck heavily. Cassian continued, "The palace gates are under military control. Parliament gathers by noon to hear the succession announcement." Lord Sorel tightened his jaw. Then, Halbrecht intends to present a false heir before the court today. Roderick unfolded one of the rescued letters carefully. Not if we expose him first. Iselle stepped beside him. The letter carried the late Queen's seal and detailed the birth of twin sons hidden from the kingdom decades earlier. Attached beneath it rested financial records linking Halbrecht and the Sovereign Circle to illegal military funding, assassinations, and blackmail against noble families. Enough evidence to destroy powerful men forever. Yet fear still settled inside Iselle's chest. What if the court refuses to believe us? Cassian answered quietly. Then the kingdom burns. Outside, rain began falling lightly across the city rooftops. Roderick turned toward Iselle slowly. There is something else you deserve to know before we enter that palace. She held his gaze carefully. The night we married, he said, your mother came to me privately. Lord Sorel lowered his eyes. Roderick continued. She knew the Circle had started searching for you. She begged me to keep your identity hidden until the Marquess believed it was safe. Pain tightened inside Iselle. All those years, she whispered. You already knew. Yes. Then why let your mother treat me so cruelly? Roderick looked devastated by the question itself. Because I believed, keeping you close inside, Greythorn protected you from greater danger. His voice roughened. By the time I understood how deeply my mother served the Circle, too much damage had already been done. Iselle turned away quietly. Part of her wanted to remain angry, but another part remembered the man who crossed snowstorms to see her smile, the man who stood bleeding on sea cliffs, ready to die protecting her. The truth had never been simple between them. A servant suddenly rushed into the glass house. My lady, he gasped. Royal soldiers are searching nearby streets. Cassian immediately reached for his sword. We move now. Within minutes they entered the capital, disguised beneath traveling cloaks. Crowds already filled the narrow streets as rumors of the king's death spread through the city like wildfire. Merchants whispered anxiously. Soldiers guarded every major crossing. Fear lingered everywhere. By midday, the Grand Parliament Hall overflowed with nobles, ministers, clergy, and military officers gathered beneath towering chandeliers. At the center platform stood Lord Halbrecht, calm, elegant, untouched by the chaos he created. Beside him waited a pale young man dressed richly enough to suggest royal blood. A puppet heir, Cassian muttered from the hidden balcony above the chamber. Iselle remained concealed behind the curtains while Roderick and Lord Sorel prepared the documents nearby. Below them, Halbrecht raised one hand for silence. With deep sorrow, the minister announced, "We mourn our beloved king." Murmurs swept through the chamber, but the kingdom must not fall into uncertainty. Before his passing, His Majesty entrusted me with knowledge regarding the surviving royal bloodline. The false heir stepped forward nervously. Halbrecht smiled toward Parliament. The crown rightfully belongs to Prince Renwald. Several nobles applauded immediately. Others looked uncertain. Then the great chamber doors burst open. Every head turned sharply. Roderick Valameres strode into Parliament Hall, beside royal guards still loyal to the old king. Blood stained the bandages beneath his coat, but his voice thundered across the chamber with unmistakable authority. "That man is a fraud." Shock exploded through the hall. Halbrecht's calm expression finally shifted. Roderick climbed the central stairs slowly. Lord Minister Halbrecht stands accused of treason, murder, conspiracy against the crown, and manipulation of the royal succession. The chamber erupted into chaos. Halbrecht recovered quickly. "You arrive wounded and desperate, Your Grace." "Not desperate." Isel stepped from the balcony shadows at last. Gasp spread everywhere. The abandoned Duchess, cast out by Greythorn, now stood before the entire kingdom, carrying the Meyerfeld seal openly upon her cloak. Halbrecht's face darkened instantly. Lord Sorrel descended beside her, carrying the rescued documents. "The true royal records are here," he declared. Nobles surged forward while Parliament guards surrounded the minister cautiously. Halbrecht laughed softly. "You think papers will destroy me?" "No," Isel answered steadily. "Your own crimes will." She handed the Queen's sealed letters directly to the Archbishop overseeing Parliament. Silence slowly consumed the chamber as the elderly man read the contents aloud. Proof of the hidden bloodline, proof of forged succession records, proof of the Circle's assassinations. Every word shattered another piece of Halbrecht's power. Several ministers immediately attempted to flee the hall. Royal guards stopped them. Cassian entered from the rear balcony, with Verlic riders surrounding captured Circle members dragged in chains behind them. One prisoner cried out desperately. Halbrecht ordered every death. The chamber exploded into shouting. Halbrecht's composure finally cracked. "You fools," he snapped. "The kingdom needed strength." "You murdered innocent families," Roderick said coldly. "I preserved order. You created terror." Halbrecht's eyes locked onto Isel with sudden hatred. All this because one forgotten girl inherited wealth she never deserved. The insult no longer wounded her, because she finally understood her worth never depended upon Greythorn, titles, or frightened nobles. She stepped closer calmly. "You cast me aside as though I was nothing," she said softly. "Yet the truth buried beneath your lies destroyed all of you instead." Halbrecht suddenly seized a hidden pistol from inside his coat. Screams erupted across Parliament Hall. He aimed directly toward Isel. Roderick moved first. The Duke threw himself between them just as the shot fired. The bullet tore through his shoulder instead. Cassian's riders tackled Halbrecht violently before he could fire again. Parliament guards seized the minister while nobles shouted in outrage around the chamber. Isel dropped beside Roderick instantly as blood spread across his sleeve. "You stubborn man," she whispered shakily. Despite the pain, he managed the faintest smile. "At least this time I did not stay silent." Hours later, the bells of the capital rang again. Not for mourning, for judgment. By royal decree, Lord Halbrecht and the surviving leaders of the Sovereign Circle were stripped of title, lands, and power before imprisonment, awaited trial for treason and murder. The false prince confessed everything publicly before sunset. And for the first time in years, the kingdom breathed without fear. 3 weeks later, Greythorn Manor stood silent beneath autumn skies. Servants lined the entrance hall nervously as carriage wheels rolled across the courtyard once more. Isel stepped down slowly beside Roderick. The manor looked unchanged, yet everything inside it had transformed. Whispers followed her once before. Now every servant bowed deeply, not from fear of wealth, from respect. Roderick turned toward the great doors quietly. "You never have to enter this place again if you do not wish to." Isel studied the estate where she once stood abandoned in the rain with nowhere to go. Then she answered calmly, "No, I believe some places deserve new memories." Inside the manor chapel rested Lady Maevra's memorial beneath candlelight. Roderick stood silently before his mother's grave marker for a long time. "She loved power more than peace," he finally said. Isel joined him quietly. "But part of her still loved you." Pain crossed his face. "She destroyed herself protecting monsters." "No," Isel answered gently. She destroyed herself by refusing to stop. The truth hurt, but it also freed him. Outside the chapel windows, sunlight finally touched Greythorn's gardens again, after weeks of storm. Days later, Parliament officially recognized Iselle as rightful heir to House Meyerfeld and protector of its estates. Yet, to the shock of many nobles, she refused every attempt to place her near the throne, debate consuming the kingdom. She wanted no crown born from blood and betrayal. Instead, she restored Meyerfeld trade routes, reopened schools closed during the Circle's corruption, and used part of her inheritance to support families destroyed by noble conspiracies. People across the kingdom began speaking her name differently after that. Not with pity, with admiration. One evening near winter's arrival, Iselle stood upon Greythorn's balcony, watching snow fall softly across the hills. Roderick approached beside her, carrying the same ring she once returned in the rain. "I know I cannot erase what happened," he said quietly. She looked toward him carefully. "But if there is any place left in your heart for forgiveness, then I would spend the rest of my life earning it honestly." The wind moved gently around them. No grand speeches remained anymore. No hidden lies. Only the truth. Iselle took the ring slowly and placed it back into his hand before closing his fingers around it. "You already know I loved you once," she whispered. Roderick's expression dimmed slightly. Then she continued softly, "The difference now is that love must stand beside trust." Hope returned to his eyes, and for the first time since the storm began, peace settled quietly between them. Far below, Greythorn Manor glowed warmly against the winter night, while the kingdom moved forward at last from the shadows that nearly destroyed it all. The Duchess, once cast into the rain, had returned stronger than every person who betrayed her. And this time, nobody would ever force her out again.